Fitness is the product of the product of the product. It's the end product of the efforts and dedication of our members. And so our job, therefore, is to provide the opportunities and the spaces to help them achieve more than they thought possible. It's up to them, it's their responsibility. It's not ours.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast, where we speak to one of the most recognisable CEOs in the fitness industry, whose name is synonymous with the successful turnaround of multisite brand Total Fitness, known for some of the largest locations in Europe. Believing that the performance of any business lies in the effectiveness of its people, our guest has placed a team at the centre of the business recovery, driving a culture of leadership through all levels of the workforce.
The gym industry is not thoughtful about what women's needs. The promise that we make to our markets and our customers is that we'll provide all of the spaces and opportunities for you to achieve more than you thought is possible. There's a big piece around the people and unlocking their potential and just, delivery through engagement and alignment and looking after your people well.
So please welcome Sophie Lawler to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Sophie, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
You're most welcome, Matt. I love a chat.
I thought I'd start off something different. Normally you go straight into business, but I know you're a fitness person, and I thought I'd ask you, what was your last workout then?
It was Barry's this morning. It's legs day. It's Tuesday today. So I was at Barry's in Manchester, in the city. So that's the quick answer, but I should qualify it in that everybody always goes, oh, hang on a minute. Do you not train at your own clubs? I have multiple gym memberships and I just train wherever I am. So a couple of budget memberships. I train at Total Fitness. I swim at Total Fitness because our pool sides are so exceptional. I have a premium membership at a premium health club chain. But I just think that's the right thing to do.
Right. So what kind of workouts are you enjoying at the moment? And why do you particularly like those then?
Well, I should say that it really sort of depends, what sort of training I need for that particular part of the month. So at the moment, I need quite a lot of heavy weightlifting and to sort of keep me through this week, I think. So that's what I really enjoy this week. But I tell you what, next week, Matt, I will be running down on the beach where I live in Bournemouth, and I will thoroughly enjoy that. So it really depends on my headspace and what I need in the moment. I think variety is really important. But when I need sort of heavy legs day with some treadmills in it, then it's Barry's Manchester all day long, which is a very different sort of Barry's to the other Barry's experiences that I've had around the world.
Right. And so you link your workouts into what's going on in your life, do you then? If it's a heavy week, your heavy legs and strength, or is that how you roll?
Yeah, a little bit. And I guess it's something that we actually don't talk about very much in the industry. So we're going straight in there, Matt, into the difficult territory. But I'm a woman, and there are ways in which we should train at different points of time in the month. And I didn't know that until I was in my 30s. So I was training in the same way until my middle 30s, when I read a book and listened to a podcast and went, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong for so long. And so there's a little bit of mindset and what's going on for me, because I do an awful lot of traveling, but there's also a little bit physically in terms of what I need, depending on where I am as a woman within the month.
I didn't realize actually HIIT training was something that you didn't do at certain points in the month. I did an interview with a lady about a year ago, and it's something I've talked to my wife about, because I've never been into, she certainly hadn't been into a gym where they kind of advise you of how to cycle your workouts depending on what's happening as a woman. Do you know anybody that does that?
Nobody that does it well. It's something that we're very thoughtful about at TF at the moment, because it's one of the concepts that we're on site building at one of our clubs, is a women's gym. And it's cognizant of that and women's needs, but not just in terms of their training physically at different sort of monthly stages and different life stages, just generally what they need. It's quite a taboo topic, particularly
like everything nowadays.
now. But I mean, one of the reasons that we are very thoughtful about this particular topic at the moment is purely demand. So, oh my God, we've got straight into business and product, but all of our research, and we're a very sort of data-driven business that takes a real sort of listening approach. The vast majority of organic search traffic in our local markets was all for a women's space. Like astonishingly so, like it over-indexed every other category, every other search category. It was astonishing. And then I looked at our women's product and went, oh God, it's horrendous. So we embarked on quite a big research project about, what is it that women really, really need? And therefore, what is it that we should believe about women's needs in the gym area? And it's been so eye-opening. And so we've built this product, a gym product for women and women's needs. And we're really excited about it. It was one of my last meetings, so it's quite top of mind.
How do you deal with I suppose we talked about sort of sensitive, everything's sensitive nowadays, and so having a specific product for women, does that upset people? Because it's kind of, I suppose now everything needs to address a number of different demographics and be very inclusive, and having something for women, does that then upset certain parts of the population as well? Do you know?
It's a really, really difficult area, but it is one that we have to face into because the market and our customers are telling us that they need it and want it, and it's unserved and it's little thought about. And the more that we delve into that area, we realize that it is. And the gym industry is not thoughtful about what women's needs. And I've been a happy gym member and gym user of all sorts of different flavors of gyms for a very, very long time. So I'm almost desensitized to it. But the moment you get under the skin of it, somebody has to get thoughtful about it, and somebody's got to face into it. And so the position that we take is, well, we're responding to a very clear demand and a very clear set of needs. And it's our responsibility to cater for our members and our marketplaces. And what we will do is we will resource some sort of very sort of credible psychosexual and medical practitioners to support us, to help us position why it is needed and why it's ever so slightly different.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I certainly, you're obviously at Fitness First back in the early 2000s, and we used to work with them back then as well. And they used to, for certain areas, they had these women's gyms, and I think it was Elaine actually that was probably, I think it was Elaine. There was a small team that were on this, were on the project. Fitness First for Women, it was called, I think.
Fitness First for Women, yeah.
And it seems to have it was a great idea for a number of reasons, particularly I think in London, where there was just certain religions as well, where, they had to train separately. And so it was a great idea, but it seemed to, and a lot of gyms at the time had these women's areas, and then they seemed to drop away and almost become not as popular. But when you, like you say, listen to a lot of the podcasts and see some of the research, it's almost like a real argument to say, well, really, for a number of reasons, you kind of have to, in some ways, understand some of the specifics between how men would train and how women would train. And in order to have a great experience, then you want to get hold of that knowledge from a professional. What's your thoughts on that?
And how women, I think we need to celebrate some level of difference here. There are things that are the same. There will be many similar reasons about the way we want to train and the level of accomplishment that it gives you, and empowerment. But there are definitely things that are different. And hormonally, women are very different, and what that requires, and they're different through the month, whereas men are not, cisgender men are not. And so there are very, very different ways in which you need to train, and sort of thinking about that has really, really been an eye-opener. But what I would say is, I was around about the time of Fitness First for Women, and all of my huge total fitness clubs have ladies-only gyms as well. And when I arrived 5 years ago, I was the first in line to sort of walk around the clubs and open the doors to these women's gyms and go, oh, I'll have this space back, please. Let's do something more exciting with these spaces. of course, in the round of things, it was never a priority and we never got across it. But I look back at myself 5 years ago and think, my God, you've come a long way, Sophie. You've really started to listen to your market and think a little bit more carefully about what it is you need to do, and not necessarily take the industry approach, which for a women's product was just very much, well, it's a separate space. Same kit, separate space, but if anything, the kit is just smaller. So, but what that means is they're like naughty corners. They're just the same, but smaller with little equipment. And it's absolutely not what that audience requires, but it is an audience with a very specific and very unmet need that, we've got to be thoughtful about, because the market is telling us very, very firmly that it's unmet and it's needed. So it's our responsibility to face into that, as I said earlier.
Introducing the next big thing in functional training, the Escape Barrow, a revolutionary training tool that combines a loaded farmer's carry with a sled push to develop hip, grip, and core strength. Developed in partnership with Pete Holman, inventor of the TRX Rip Trainer and Nautilus Glute Drive, the Escape Barrow can be rolled, pushed, dragged and carried. The Escape Barrow packs a punch with an impressive load capacity of 440 pounds, and with a 2-stage galvanized paint covering process, it's also ideal for outdoor use. So head over to escapefitness.com/barrow. That's escapefitness.com/barrow to find out more. Enjoy the rest of this episode.
What are the challenges with a brand like yours, which your clubs are, for those of you who have never been in one, are vast, and they really do have everything. They've got pools, they've got racket sports, I believe, in some, and huge gyms, and a lot of different people, I would guess, a very mixed demographic. So when you're looking to address specific segments, and I know male and female is not necessarily a small segment, but how do you manage to successfully communicate some of those when there's so many things that go on, and there must be so many different messages that you're fighting to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it is a blessing and a curse, our proposition, and it's a business I know of old. I used to sell memberships here back in 2001. It was my first proper job in the gym industry. And you're right to point out, for those that don't know the business, we don't have a huge estate, but what we have is huge. So these are the biggest health clubs in Europe. The biggest is 150-ish thousand square feet. The smallest is 60,000, so they're absolutely monstrous. The demographic, you're right, therefore, if we just think about demographic and population just in terms of age, they're vast. It is a very, very different proposition. It's high variety, because we believe that fitness is lifelong. And so whereas if I take sort of like another middle market proposition, for example, they'll find that the majority of their members are 25 to 45. About 20-ish% of my members are over the age of 55, 25% even. Another 20% are below the age of 22. So it's really, really spread. It's a really sort of difficult population to serve in one particular way. So this is very much a mass market product. And we operate in the markets of the north of England and Wales, and they're not huge markets. I've got sort of 5 or 6 clubs in and around Manchester, but they're destination clubs outside of cities. So they're not huge catchment populations, and an average size Total Fitness needs about 6,000 members, right? So at any one time. And so niche marketing is not a thing. So targeting a specific kind of member is not a thing. So we're not a niche model by a long chalk. But I just think there's something quite unbelievable in that, because when strategists have sort of talked to me post-arrival and gone, yeah, but Sophie, who are your customer segments and how do you segment and how do you therefore communicate segments? I've gone, hey, I've been around the industry for a very, very long time now. And if I have 100,000 members, I've got 100,000 segments. because I just don't think it's that simple. And I think people's attitudes to fitness differ throughout their life as well. And so I think the responsibility we take as a brand is a little bit different, Matt, in that the promise that we make to our markets and our customers is that we'll provide all of the spaces and opportunities for you to achieve more than you thought is possible. So over to you. We'll provide the spaces and the opportunities and all of the variety. And so to that end and to that extent, it's not something that concerns us too much, because that's our promise and it's pretty universal. And, I get the fuzzies about it. I think it's pretty special.
So going back, like I used to work with Total Fitness when we started our company probably 25 years ago. And I remember Mr. Goombay. And for those of you who don't know, he was the founder, I believe, of Quick Save. Was that right? Supermarket.
That's correct. Yep.
Supermarket chain. And so he was a very smart guy. From what I read about him, very, very, very smart, was extremely successful business person. And I guess when he came out of supermarkets, went into health clubs, which is kind of a strange jump. But when he came into it, how much of the thinking in terms of, like, he went so much bigger than anybody in the industry had done at the time. He went into, as you say, not into major markets, into sort of these other, I don't know what you call them, but like sub-markets. And so do you think, after you were with the business back then and now you're sort of heading it up now, do you think any of the decisions that he made strategically in terms of place, location, size of location, anything like that, do you think any of that is in some of the secret formula that you're still carrying ahead today?
I think more recently we've had to sort of rethink what that secret formula is, because you can sort of look back at it and go, that was strategic brilliance, but equally you can go, oh my God, that's a strategic nightmare, for some of the reasons that I've laid out already, and some more besides. I mean, these are middle market, huge clubs that require, a heavy member count at any one turn, in markets in the north that are difficult, in a product that you can't segment and be very clever and niche about. So it's quite difficult talking to investors sometimes. So you could say that strategically that's very, very difficult. On the flip side, you could say, my God, what a visionary. Strategic brilliance. So he built the clubs himself with his own money. He's one of the world's first self-made billionaires. And his own spade in the ground. There's hallmarks of Albert Goubet all over these clubs, sort of ingrained and built into them. And there's lots of stories about that too. But one of the really interesting things that he did was, I guess it sort of talked to the market at the time. It was a very sort of value proposition-led strategy, and that was as far as it went, Matt. So basically what it did, it was the original sort of low-cost challenger. I would call it very much a challenger brand. But low cost done very differently. It's just low cost on a bloody massive scale with a load of swimming pools. In that he sort of took the industry at the time, which in the UK was just all middle market. It was just very, very vanilla. There was a load of brands, and I'm sure you could list at least 20 of them, but they were all the same. They were sort of middle size, middle price, generally had swimming pools. The only ones that didn't were Fitness First. They were the original low cost sort of dry side operator. And Total Fitness just arrived and said, so I take your value proposition of gym, swim, cafe, and classes, and I raise you. You're one swimming pool that's round and you can't do lengths in. I've got 3 per site, at least. So you're 50 treadmills and I've got 100, and I'm going to have a running track as well. And it just took everything and supersized it, but priced it at a middle market price. It was I used to sell really heavy joining fees here. The joining fee here used to be 150 quid. But the rack rate on the most expensive individual membership was 42. I used to sell them here at Wilmslow, £42.50. So it was a proper sort of challenger brand. And that was quite a disruptive, you could argue, depending on your definition of what disruption is, could be considered quite disruptive. So to some extent, strategically interesting. The other strategically interesting thing that he did, it's another Goubet hallmark that was built into the clubs, is I'm not sure he was entirely sold on fitness and whether or not it would work. So some of the clubs were built with being repurposed as a massive supermarket if it didn't work. So when you go to our Chester club, for example, you go, this looks like it could be a huge supermarket. So I think that in itself is quite punchy from a strategic perspective to go, well, I'll build something with optionality in it. So there's lots of ways in which there was strategic brilliance, but a few ways in which, would sow the seeds of things that were going to get really quite tough over time, because, this is a business that's weathered quite a few storms. The middle market has been through a tough time in the UK, as I'm sure you know, but we'll come out the other side, and it's turned out to be, with the right sort of purpose and the right sort of retrofitted secret formula, I think were the words you use, it's proved to be exceptionally resilient. And we've traded exceptionally well over the last 5 years, if we ignore the COVID episode. Utterly sensational.
I know, and I don't know whether it's true, but he was obviously very smart in some of the ways that he dealt with the supermarkets. Just being able to operate on, extremely small margins, and every little thing he did seemed to add up to the whole idea. And I heard the stories about, like, his swimming pools. He actually sort of drilled down into the sort of water level and pumped the water back up for the pools. Was that a true story? And is that something you guys still do now?
No, it's not one that I'm familiar with. That sounds a little bit fangled, but there's lots of ways in which the thinking around the build was really quite interesting. So the buildings are so big that we don't have air conditioning. We have air handling units, which are, at their time, they were really quite innovative in that they use there's a combination of sort of the heat and the electricity that takes heat from the swimming pool, turns it into this, it helps to cool the air here. So just utterly ridiculous for their time. And they're still in top nick, because these are bespoke facilities, bespoke clubs, and we know how to look after them really, really well. But there's other things like the pools are they were built upwards and then built around instead, and they're huge stainless steel pools, so they're not intricately tiled, so they're much easier to maintain, and they're much cheaper to build, and all sorts of things. I mean, you can see behind me, my office has a breeze block wall. The entire thing is very no frills, so the entire buildings are just made of ugly breeze blocks and painted. So there's another way in which he was quite challenging to the market, in that what he said was, I'm going to provide all of this facility, but I'm going to build it in an exceptionally, it was value engineering to the T, in an exceptionally economical way, and I'm going to do without all of the frill and the fluff, and it's just going to be a massive amount of variety at the lowest possible cost to the consumer, and that in itself, I think, was quite special.
So you started there as a membership consultant and an instructor, from what I understand. Did a term at Fitness First, and then you rejoined as a CEO in the CEO position. What was that decision and step up like? Because you obviously never historically done that role, and it must have been. I don't know. I was interested to sort of hear your thoughts in terms of how you felt about taking that step. It's a big business, and talk a little bit about that sort of step up, and how and why you made that decision.
There's quite a story. So I mean, it is a business that I knew from old, and I should say that I was a membership consultant here when I was paying off my university debt, and I ended up being membership manager here at Wilmslow. And this was back in the day, and I can remember we sold 1,200 memberships in January here, the year that I left, and it was the wild west of the industry, that I'm sure you will imagine. It was a highly acquisitive industry. It was really unpleasant, and Total Fitness was a really unpleasant place to work, and it churned me out within 18 months, and I've got a lot of energy, so so it spat me out quite quickly, and then I went and built a career elsewhere, including Fitness First. But, I wound up the work that I was doing at Fitness First towards the end of 2017. And at that point, I'd finished work sort of supporting the transactions in Asia and Australia and supporting the German business sort of reset and get on the path to where it is today with Martin at the helm. And that was sort of my last work for Fitness First. So that reached a natural conclusion. We were all sort of, ready to sort of step down at that point. And I stepped down at the same time as the group chief exec, Oren Peleg. And do you know what, Matt? After that sort of 2-year roller coaster, doing that particular work for Fitness First, which was a lot of international travel and really quite challenging, very stretchy from a learning perspective, I just didn't want to see the fitness industry ever again. And I also needed a rest. So I took a rest and then went out into the job market and thought, well, what is it that I'm really quite good at? And let's go and find that somewhere else, away from the gym industry. And I sort of nailed it down to, and I worked with the old chief exec at Fitness First, Oren Peleg, to sort of help me nail down what is it that you're really brilliant at. And it was, working in a distressed situation where there's quite a lot of chaos, and bringing structure and order and working out, building strategy, but equally knowing the detail. And I nailed all that down. And I went out into the market and started talking to people in London and sowing those seeds. And so about a couple of months later, I was talking to somebody at a headhunting agency who were talking to me about something in casual dining. And they said, oh yes, I know something. I've just placed a chief executive into the fitness industry, actually, into the gym sector, into a business called Total Fitness. And I went, that's a business I know well. Good luck, that's going to be difficult, because the middle market had been through its journey, and the business to me still looked exactly the same as it was back in 2001. And I thought nothing of it. Anyway, this sort of conversation came back to me a couple of months later, and I thought, do you know what? I was working in a self-employed capacity at that point, and I was reaching the end of the project. I was looking for a new one, and I Googled the chief exec. And I found him on LinkedIn, and it turned out that he had gone to the same university as me to do his bachelor's degree. Tiny university on a hill in Staffordshire. It's the one that nobody knows about. And he'd also studied politics. And I'd gone, okay, this is interesting. And so I just dropped him a line and said, hey, we studied the same topic at the same time at the same university. I'm the only politics student in the gym industry. What are you doing on my turf? I said, look, I know what you're up against with Total Fitness. It's a business I know well, and I've been working in middle market turnarounds for a long time. Do you want to go for a coffee? At the time I was living up in the Northeast, I said, I'll meet you in Teesside. And I went and met him. We had a good chat. And I thought, bloody hell, this looks like hard work. There's a lot of heavy lifting to do here. And I finished the conversation and I said, hey, look, here's my day rate. You can have me for 3 months. I can help you build the plan, get buy-in, sort out the commercial model, the way it all looks, and build the investment case. About 3 months, I think it will take. And you don't need me after that. And then I got a call from the investment house that owns Total Fitness. I was thinking, that's a bit weird. And so I went to go meet them, told them what I thought. And because I had no skin in the game at all, Matt, I was quite punchy, borderline insulting. But I was quite punchy about it. And I just automatically had quite a few thoughts about it. Thought nothing of it. Next day, I'm sitting in David Lloyd's club in the Northeast, having a coffee after my swim. And a very good friend of mine from the fitness industry, a chap called Dave Langridge, who runs a digital content business, had called me up. He's ex-Fitness First as well. I said, so Dave, I've had this really weird conversation, and then there's this business, and da-da-da-da. I told him all about it and how difficult it was going to be, but how I was really a bit frustrated about how hard it was going to be and how much work I could see that needed doing. And I said, and then, Dave, I don't actually think it's got a chief exec anymore. So I don't think I'm going to get, a 3-month piece of work there. And Dave said to me, Sophie, did you just say there's a chief exec vacancy? I said, yeah. I mean, what a nightmare. They've lost another one. And he said, right, I'll ask you one more time and then I'll tell you, Sophie, you are looking for work and there's a chief executive job going. And I said, yeah, I've had that conversation, Dave. And should we move on? And he said, well, why aren't you not talking to them about it? And I said, well, of course I'm not. I can't do that. And he said, okay, well, I'll leave that one with you. And I hung up the phone and thought, And I had another coffee, and then I phoned the owners and said, so actually, would you like to talk about the chief exec role instead of just a self-employed piece? And they said, yeah, that's exactly what we had in mind. And that was that. And so there was no grand plan. I didn't know I could do it. I actually didn't think I'd be particularly good at it. I just thought, in all honesty, Matt, that opportunity there looks so frustrating and so painful. I'm going to go and give it a go. It looks really uncomfortable. So if you don't know that you can't do it, what's stopping you? What can get any worse? Go and give it a crack. And so that's it, really. So it's not my fault. It's my mate Dave's.
And what year was that you took on that role?
So that was just over 5 years ago. So it's June 2018 now, and it's been quite a roller coaster since.
Well, I was reading about it. So it seems as, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading that in 2022, it was the first time since 2015 that the business had actually made quite significant profits, and the business had been turned around. So if that's correct, then obviously, you've done very well by the sound of things.
Well, thank you. And do you know what? It has been quite a journey. And when we reflect on it, me and the team we talk about the 3 turnarounds since 2018, because we turned it around, COVID hit, we rebuilt it, and we locked down again, and then we rebuilt it again. So we talk about a 3-time turnaround. But do you know what, Matt? We've done an awful lot, but it's of no credit to me, really. An awful lot of the people that, run our clubs in particular and do all of the heavy lifting, because at the end of the day, the majority of the workforce is doing the hard yards out in clubland. A lot of those guys are the same people, and they were brilliant when I arrived. They just had an awful lot of potential that just needed unlocking, and they just needed, some direction, some confidence. They were very proud, but it just needed direction, confidence, purpose, and belief. And so there's absolutely no sort of magic, if you like. All of the potential was here in the existing people. It just needed unlocking. That's all. So it's testament to them, really. It really is. It's been utterly phenomenal. And for all that it's been very difficult, I think, it reached my 5-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. We had a big event here at Wilmslow, not to mark that 5 years, just because we have a leadership event every summer. And I just, I sat and reflected and just thought, these people are absolutely exceptional. They're absolutely brilliant. And all I do is stand on their shoulders and get to do this sort of thing.
Well, it's definitely a challenging industry to be in. On a number of, in any whatever country you go in and whatever part of the market that you're in. So it's certainly a lot of people are not in a profitable position, or they weren't as of last year. And I guess being through, I suppose, taking on a difficult business pre-pandemic, and then being hit with the pandemic, and then I guess moving, from what I understand, more from a sort of low cost brand into more of the middle market. What were some of the, I suppose, what are some of the key things that you looked at strategically? Like, and I'll come on to the team, because there was some interesting stuff that you've done there as well. But when you look at the business, the spreadsheet, you've recently refinanced, and so I'm sure there's people around the table looking at the numbers and saying, okay, right, we need to increase our revenue, we need to reduce our costs, we need to look at our margins. What were some of the things that you were actively thinking about to make that shift and become turn the business around and so that you're in a good financial position?
Yeah, and I mean, the transformation has been significant, I think. If I think about, we just take 2018 markers and 2022 to 23 markers of EBITDA, which is sort of a really sort of commonly understood KPI, isn't it? So including, energy costs, which have tripled, the EBITDA of this business has times by 5. So it's 5 times what it was from 2018 to 2022, including all of the, the disruption of COVID. So clearly we're doing something right. There's sort of the mild tragedy of it is, and the thing that I poke myself in the eye in when I'm sort of looking with my CFO at the finance packs, is that had the energy crisis not been a new headwind, our EBITDA would be 9 times or 10 times what it was in 2018. So to times your EBITDA by 10 without cutting cost is significant. And do you know what? It just blows me away. I can't actually believe that we've done it. I'm sure at some point somebody's going to show me a clever maths trick which just unpicks it all. But we've just been through a refinancing, so we know that all of our numbers are solid because somebody else has told us yet. So we know our numbers are solid. But the question is, what did you do? So there's a big piece around the people and unlocking their potential and just, delivery through engagement and alignment and looking after your people well. We absolutely did not take and could not take a capital investment driven approach. So the business didn't receive a lot of CapEx. In fact, when I arrived, we were in the bank's naughty corner. I think within my first few weeks, I had to go meet the banks and sing for our supper. So we were already in the naughty corner. So we haven't driven all of that growth through CapEx investment, which is interesting because that's the industry's usual approach. What I did see when I arrived was the strategy that had been taken with this particular business, which I should say, Matt, it's no criticism, it's just a different way of viewing the world, is the business sort of took this view that it would outsource as many products and services as possible and streamline the central cost overhead and sort of almost run it. The most comparable example I can think of in the UK for audience members that know sort of UK motorways is motorway service stations, right? So you've been in the UK recently and you'll know what they look like. So it's a lot of other brands in a building, right? And that works just fine for that particular kind of business. But the difficulty is that the people that work for that particular motorway service station, what have they got to do and how rich is their roles? Well, they've got to look after the toilets, keep them clean, keep the building okay, and that's it. Now, that's a wonderful strategy for some businesses, but it's not okay for fitness. And it's not okay for gyms because, we don't have many clubs, but I still have 100,000 members and they're training the clubs, right? So I still need a big compliance team. I still need a finance team. The people who operate the clubs, by that particular point, they're really disengaged. There's no role richness at all. So your employee churn is off the chart and your engagement levels are through the floor. So you need an even bigger people team at the centre to keep managing that churn and recruitment and training. So the idea that you can outsource and streamline the centre just doesn't work. So what they ended up with was all of these outsourced products and services and an even bigger centre and no connection to the customer and no consistency or control over the member experience. So it's bad for the people, it's bad for the members, and it's really bad for the organisation. So that was a really obvious one to me. So the people and the engagement issue and sort of the outsourcing strategy was just not going to work. And so over a period of 5 years, and there's been an awful lot of other pieces of work involved in it, clearly, but if I step up to a really high level, it was all about building our employee value proposition back, giving people some purpose, values, behaviours, culture of leadership, proper leadership, number one, and then slowly restoring our products and services so that we can start to sort of build a product from the inside out again. And so I think, for a long story, there's two really big things, I guess.
Coming up next.
It was that commitment to them and their journeys and our responsibility for them that sort of gave us that rocket fuel, I think, to navigate through the pandemic. There is a role for digital at TF, but I know what that role is. It's about enablement and efficiency for the core product. Leadership for me is just leading other people. It's not really about the senior leadership team. It's everybody, because it's a behaviour, it's a practice, and it's exceptionally empowering for life. I think we sort of overcomplicate fitness because we hold it on a pedestal as our product, and it's just not the product.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And with on the people side, because you were going through this again at a time where, coming off the pandemic, from what I heard, certainly from a lot of other operators, is it was a lot of staff left, particularly on the personal training side, set up their own businesses. It was just difficult to get people and keep people. So was that something that you were able to minimize because of some of the initiatives that you did in terms of training, etc., or was that something that you introduced sort of shortly after the pandemic?
No, it was pre-pandemic. So that was pretty much all of the heavy lifting that we did pre-pandemic. So we were in post, or I was in post for 18 months pre the first closure, and just before we were closed, we were out to market for refinancing on the back of a double EBITDA and a really solid run rate. So that was a bit of a moment. But everything that had driven that stellar performance in that first 18 months was all delivered through a really solid approach to your people strategy, your engagement strategy, all of that good stuff. I mean, the indicators for the business couldn't have been worse when I arrived. It was significantly over-managed, and that had driven engagement levels really, really through the floor. So that was... It's a tough one to sort out, that, Matt. It takes a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of dedicated work, but it absolutely drove the business forward to be approaching a refinancing before COVID. So a lot of that have been certainly started, but it's a job that's never finished pre-COVID. But I think when I look back, what that meant was that we had a really, really high degree of not just employee net promoter scores, which was world-class. I think it was 45% just before we went into lockdown, and a world-class benchmark is 40%. Just before we went into lockdown, and we'd already sort of arrested the churn and the retention issue. So I had a really, really high trust score in both the leadership and the organisation generally. And so when we closed the business, what we did was, we furloughed everybody. There was only 5 of us working throughout, but we redoubled the effort. We just redoubled the effort on engaging, communicating, developing our people all the way through that particular period. We actually worried far less about the members. We communicated with them, but in a fairly sort of responsible way. Here's what's happening. Here's what reopening will look like, but not in a, we didn't go wild for creating shed loads of curated content. I just focused solely on making sure our people were okay, including, everybody in club, regardless of role. Somebody gave them a call every single week to say, hey, how are you doing? What you've been up to? What you're working on? What you're thinking about? How you're feeling about life? How you're feeling about work? But what that meant was, when the time came, and I knew it would come at some point, and I knew we wouldn't have much notice, of course we didn't, was that, the hammer would go down and would be expected to reopen with all of these re-engaged people who were just ready to come out the blocks really quickly. And that's exactly what happened. So we retained all of our management teams. We reopened with an immense amount of energy and enthusiasm, went through the period that year that involved, locking down some clubs open, some with part services, all of that, story. But it was that commitment to them and their journeys and our responsibility for them that sort of gave us that rocket fuel, I think, to navigate through the pandemic. And then the final lockdown, which was exceptionally painful for an awful lot of us. But I think that's the thing, beyond the actual strategy of sort of insourcing and restoring products. That's the thing. It's the teams that have done this.
And it's an interesting decision, because I've spoke to a lot of people about this, and it seems like a long time ago now, but we're still definitely suffering the effects. But I guess there's two kind of directions that you can take. One is to be and I'm not saying either of these are right or anything, but to kind of explain the way I'm thinking about it is one is, okay, look, who are the customers? How can we maintain the relationship? Flip them potentially into something that's going to keep the business going, like digital, because maybe we never open again and we can't open again, and so there's a guaranteed next step for our business. And a lot of people did that, and then there's like, okay, let's prioritize the people, which must have taken quite a bit of belief, particularly in the thick of lockdowns, where it's like, okay, look, this was originally going to be for a few weeks, now it's been whatever it ended up being in the UK, it's going to be a long time. And at that point, I suppose for most people, the costs were racking up and rent is still there. And so there must have been a certain element of faith of, we are going to get through this. Hence a reason to decide on prioritizing investment in staff, which nobody knows whether that would have been the right thing, or to make an investment into, all right, let's just kind of figure out some alternative revenue streams, because we may not be able to open some of these locations. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's the job at the end of the day, to sort of make the more sort of challenging binary sort of opportunity cost decisions, where you can do this or you can do this, but you can't do it all. And of course you can't do it all, because there was 5 people working throughout. And sort of beyond the immediate priorities of managing for cash, managing creditor liabilities, and monitoring the membership base, where do I expend my effort? I think for me, it was a very easy decision, actually, just because of the journey that we'd had to date, which was only 18 months in role. But being able to see the transformation of a business that was on its knees to one that was marching out for investment within 18 months, purely through the potential of the existing people, they had done it. It wasn't really a choice. They are the people now that I need to look after. They are grafted. And they are the people that know how to climb the mountain. We've done it once. And I'm going to need them, because we're going to have to climb the mountain again. Because I can see, just like every other chief exec in the industry, that immediately we've lost 20% of our members. So I'm going to need those people. And I'm going to need them to be well. I'll need them to be rested but fit. And I'll need them to be engaged. And I'll need to understand the mission. So that journey previous just made it exceptionally easy. I mean, there is, it took a strength of will within sort of the furore of it all. And, I live on my own. So, my contact with the industry was, as you'll probably remember, just loads and loads of calls and podcasts about, we're doing digital with the pivot the pivot to digital. And everybody was talking about the pivot. And to sit there and hold firm, you could call it stubbornness. It certainly wasn't an inability to make a decision. It was actually making a very firm decision that I believe in the core product. I'm not going to undermine it. There is a role for digital at TF, but I know what that role is. It's about enablement and efficiency for the core product. It's not about something else. Will we invest in digital? Well, we were actually anyway. We had to rebuild the entire IT infrastructure because it was dreadfully uninvested, but that was an existing program anyway. Did we invest in digital content? Yes, we did. We actually built an entire content filming studio here. I sort of said mid-lockdown, hey, one of those units that we've got at Wilmslow, could we not create like a multifunctional studio that's got like a business filming area, a fitness filming area, and a couch for sort of like daytime television type filming? And so we spent quite a bit of money doing that. And I have an amazing brand team here that really sort of took that idea and ran with it. But what did we use it for, Matt? Not necessarily the members. There's, some digital content for them in the app, but we created all sorts of, we call them on the couch content for engaging our people. So we did all sorts of interviews there, all sorts of, reflections from me. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the plans. Here's somebody interesting from the world of leadership. Here's somebody interesting from the world of nutrition, all sorts of people. And that's how we approached it. But it was a bit difficult to sit tight. And
I'm sure.
When the world was pivoting and go, no, you cannot pivot a swimming pool, and I've got at least 3 in every single club. Yeah. So I've got to trust that the members are going to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. The other interesting decision that you made, and there's a lot of work, I'm sure, and a lot of decisions you have to make on a regular basis in terms of where you spend your time. But I understood that you also decided to train yourself up as a master trainer and deliver a lot of your leadership programs to your team. What was why did you feel that was the right thing for you to do as the chief exec?
I didn't know you knew that. Yeah, I do. I should say from the outset that it's an absolute joy. It takes a lot of energy. But we embarked on, I sort of mentioned that when I arrived, this sort of piece about sort of engagement, behaviour, values, purpose, but also leadership culture was such an important sort of pillar of our transformation pre-COVID, and continues to be a pillar of it, is significant, and is a really significant pillar, leadership culture. And I think when I arrived in year 1, I think you said, you were asking me a question about, why that job, and, it's a big business and all. I didn't know why I was doing that. I just thought I'm going to come in here with bags of energy and, a big set of ears, and I can listen and then try and work out a plan. And I heard in spades that I could see it straight away the moment that I started to visit clubs. This was a hugely overmanaged business with a very limited approach to leadership. And management and leadership are 2 very, very different things. And what you get when you overmanage anything is you rob people of their ability to make decisions on their own, because you're just driving them. So it's very much about control, but it's very effective short term. And then leadership is very different. That's about, inspiring people to do it for themselves. And there's room for both, but you should always lean on leadership. And I could see that the business was massively overmanaged, and I thought, right, leadership, we've got to deal with this, a culture of leadership. Now, do I know how to be a leader? No. I think I do, but do I? So I found a program that was recommended to me by, I appointed a chairman. It was one of my first things to do, go shopping for a chairman, and appointed a chairman who was pretty much a mentor. He's a brilliant chap. And he listened to me talk about the overmanagement of the business. He said, you really, really need to go and meet this wonderful woman called Penny Ferguson. She has this sort of secret leadership program, and I'd recommend you go and listen to what she's got to say. And I went and met her and talked to her about total fitness, and she re-summarised some of the challenges, the behavioural challenges that I was seeing, with very different words, but in such a way that I went, that's it, you've got it. And she said, well, hey, come and do our 3-day leadership program. Bring your team with you. So that October, so we 3 months in, me and my senior leadership team went on this leadership program, and it was just brilliant. It was just phenomenal. I was like, right, so leadership for me is just leading other people. It's not really about the senior leadership team. It's everybody, because it's a behavior, it's a practice, and it's exceptionally empowering for life. So how do we do this at all levels of the business? Because it's not me that's going to turn this business around, it's everybody. And so I went to this particular business called The Living Leader, and said, can you train me to be a master trainer? And can I then, bring a couple of my team members with me? So 3 of us all trained up to be master leadership trainers. And it was the toughest thing I've done in my professional career yet. I nearly gave up on day 1, met the trainer on day 2 and said, I'll make a decision by the end of the day, but it could well be that I can't do this and I need to bring another member of my team to do it better than me. And she was like, see, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I turned my corner. But yeah, so then it's a leadership program that's delivered to only 8 to 10 people at a time. It's 2 days, and then you go away for 3 weeks, and then you come back for another day. So it's a heavy commitment of time. It takes a long time to roll that through an organization that's got 750 people in it. But we faced into it and off we went. So I guess it's two things. I didn't know how to lead. You've got to go on the journey as the chief exec and set the leadership culture. So it was an education for me, let me tell you. But then it's also the fact that it's everybody and it's everybody else, and it's so humbling to spend time in a room with 10 people, whatever their roles are, lifeguards, heads of department, facilities managers, club managers. It doesn't really matter. It's so humbling to have like 3 days with them, just, you know, taking them through the journey. It's wonderful. If I could bottle it and sell it, I would.
Well, maybe that's an idea to work on next, then your next chapter.
No, it'd be amazing if you could. It's just wonderful. But you know, that's been. Ask me what the secret formula one. That is definitely a piece of the secret formula, if you like, and you know, it's humbling.
So one of the things that we chatted about before the interview was some of the things that may not be quite right with the industry, and I guess I want to use this as an opportunity to move the conversation onto the product, because I guess ultimately the people that come through the doors, they're coming for a particular reason, and some of them are getting those needs met. Seems as though quite a few of them are not. What are some of the things that you're seeing or have seen in your current role in terms of the fitness product? How have you changed your thinking from when you came in as to what people want, and where are you now I'm talking about probably the fitness side of the business?
Oh, you're going for the big question and making me say the awkward things. So I do, for all that I am, and I would call myself an industry veteran. I've been in the industry for 22, 23 years now. But I would therefore call myself part of the problem. And so I do consider myself somewhat to be an outsider from the industry, peeping into it. And I think that's really important, because when you take that view, it's quite stark. And I'm talking about total fitness as well. When we have these horribly big, intimidating gyms that are, you know, terrifying. But when you start to take that view, you do start to recognize that the gym sector has the potential to really underdeliver for its customers. And I think there are a number of things that sort of underpin that we're trying to face into at Total Fitness, but it is a journey and we don't get it all right. So one thing that we challenge ourselves with all the time is knowing that we are not the customer. We are absolutely not the customer. And by the way, fitness is necessarily not the product. When you stand in front of a lot of fitness managers and tell them that, it's not the gentlest message to land. So we do.
And on that, just to dig in on that one then.
Yeah.
So what do you specifically mean by fitness isn't the product?
So I guess if I was to take it to like an nth degree with like a ridiculous analogy. So, I mean, to say that fitness is the product of the gym industry would be a little bit like a chocolate bar manufacturer saying that we are the obesity industry. No, you're a chocolate bar manufacturer. It would be a little bit like a vodka manufacturer saying, our product is, stumbling and dancing on tables. Fitness is the product of the product of the product. It's the end product of the efforts and dedication of our members. And so our job, therefore, is to provide the opportunities and the spaces to help them achieve more than they thought possible. It's up to them, it's their responsibility. It's not ours. And to some extent, I do think the gym industry can overpromise a little bit,
That's
mismanage
interesting.
its expectations with its customers. And when you start to think about it like that, you can see indicators of that everywhere. So, our member tenure at Total Fitness is industry leading. It's about 3.6 years per member. And our attrition levels are exceptionally low. But they're still high when you think about it from a business perspective. We still only have half of our members actually in a committed contract. So you can only guarantee 50% of your revenue at any one time. The other 50% may disappear. And that's not uncommon, right? But we seem to accept that this is just a high churn industry. Now, if fitness was our product, then it wouldn't be a high churn industry. So I think that's a really stark indicator. Another really stark indicator is, the lack of consumer support for the gym sector. In one of our more sort of recent insight pieces, and we do an awful lot of listening to the market, we asked a consumer panel and a member panel and an ex-member panel questions like, how supportive are you of the gym sector taking measures to offset its energy costs by doing things like closing hydrotherapy pools and turning down temperatures on swimming pools? And largely they thought it was to be expected, but sort of 25% have said, yeah, that 25% said that would make it cancel. Now, I actually thought that was quite helpful. I thought, okay, that's not too bad. But when you ask them, how supportive are you of government support for the gym sector? And we asked them to sort of rank it in terms of the various sectors. And we still came fourth behind retail, hotels, and hospitality. So that's just another indicator that the management of expectations of the market is not great. You could say, if you take it all the way, you could say we overpromise and we underdeliver. And part of that is because we talk about the fact that fitness is our product. And I am 100% guilty of it, by the way. I call myself right out. This is a journey of mine as well, this journey of discovery in the industry in this new role. It's not actually that new. I've been doing it for 5 years, but I'm still learning. I consider myself still learning. When you think about it like that, well, okay, fitness is not the product. And maybe that's why consumers have a relatively dim view of the gym sector. And they do have a relatively dim view of the gym sector. It's sort of like it's considered something that they just have to do, and they sort of put up with it and they sort of hack around it. But again, I think part of that is the expectation. So
what do you think on that government, just to pause there, what do you think that they put the government support down? What was your understanding of that comment then? Because that was an interesting one.
I think because it's fitness, because we're talking fitness, it's always going to be far more complicated, and there's never going to be a really straight line answer, because people's relationship with fitness is really individual. People's experiences are really, really individual, and it's quite an emotive topic. It's also the other thing that we need to remember, because we're not the customer. It's really hard work. It's not particularly good fun, and not a lot of people like to do it. I mean, there are idiots like me that really enjoy tuck jumps and burpees, but 95% of the population do not. So it's not a particularly pleasant thing for everybody to do. It's hard work. You never regret it, but the thought of it is quite difficult. It makes you feel vulnerable. The sector overpromises a little bit. And you're going to pay me to come and put the effort in? Hold on a minute. This is a really, really, really difficult proposition. So for all that, fitness is brilliant and I've long loved it and I'm a massive advocate for what it is we do, it's really, really difficult. And so when you're sort of pitted up against, hospitality, which is, a huge industry in the UK and something that is really ingrained in sort of the culture of the UK, I think people would rather have the cake and the wine than the treadmill all day long. So I think there's a little bit of that. There's possibly also a little bit of, bad experience in the gym sector. The shadow of the sort of noughties in the gym sector, the 2000s, does hang long still over the industry. Most people have been a member of a gym and quit at some point for a good reason. So I think all of that sort of stacks up. What do you think?
Well, I was wondering, it was one of the questions I'd put down, but there definitely seems to be a move from fitness to health and wellness and whatever word it is. And I suppose if I think about it a lot, I've been involved in this similar amount of time to you, and it's been a passion for nearly 40 years. So it's been something I've spent a lot of my life around, really, and for many good reasons. But I kind of wonder, for most people, even, and we had this conversation as well before, I'm in the business of selling fitness equipment. That's what I've done for 25 years. And we've always, as an organization, tried. It's been very difficult. We've always, from our very, very early days, looked at education and tried to help people, because we kind of know that majority of things that we sell, and we're in the functional training category, is even relatively experienced trainers do not really understand how to fully get the most out of a lot of stuff we sell. And that's the honest truth. And because you don't get taught it in your personal training class, so you've got to go and specialize and learn about these things. So even people that work in the industry generally don't know how to make the most out of this. So how does my mum really figure out what to do? And so I can kind of understand, obviously it's in my interest for the industry to thrive and succeed, but I can also understand the problem is you go, you sign up, you join, and unless you get paired up with a great trainer to take you on that journey, and as you say, not just about the fitness side, but all the other things around, and we spoke about the women and how their needs. It's almost like, well, how are you ever going to actually get what you want unless you're going to educate yourself? So it is a difficult challenge to solve. And I suppose what you mentioned there is that we're probably over promising. We can't totally transform your life. You've got to come in and be ready to transform yourself, and we'll kind of help you. And there's a number of ways you can do that. But I suppose it's a very simple observation, but there's probably quite a way to go in the general sense to really be able to deliver what we all promise as an industry, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, a long way. And we are coming up with more and more and more irritating questions the more we sort of tussle with this whole idea, because but that is a good thing, in that what it tells me is there's so much good work for the gym industry still to do, so much good work, and there's so much we don't know or we think we know. So talking back into your point there, one thing that I was looking at just last week, because we just got a whole ream of data from one of our annual reputation surveys. And one of the things that we were trying to unpick was, for internal audiences, so people that work in the sector or around the gym industry, what do they want out of their ideal gym experience? And then what does the external market want? And pretty much on all of those sort of 5 or 6 main sort of areas of questioning, and pretty much on every single one, the difference between the two audiences was significant. And I think the one that stood out the most, which is where I think we've really got to double down our efforts here at TF, is service level. What does your ideal gym service level look like? And the internal audiences were adamant that the ideal gym experience looked like hands-on service and lots of support. The external market wants self-sufficiency. Now, that doesn't mean that they want nothing. So that's not a huge advert for getting rid of all service at all. It's not something that I subscribe to. I work in a full-service health club chain, and I will stay in the full-service health club market. What they want is to be made self-sufficient really quite quickly. And that is our job in the gym industry. We'll provide the spaces and the opportunities, and we'll pass you the baton. Off you go. We'll be here when you need us, but off you go. And there's something exceptionally empowering about that. And we shouldn't try and take away those feelings of accomplishment from our members. And so the question that we're asking ourselves at the moment is, what is it that we can do to get our members to self-sufficient as fast as possible? And a lot of that is about education. And so you're right to talk in sort of the education, particularly around kit. A lot of the education, I think, is about what is it that you can achieve already? So there's almost like a benchmarking piece for members, which I think was fascinating in some of the thinking that we've been doing. We were working with a kit provider that on that particular kit line automatically works out the level of strain that you can take. And what was fascinating is that you massively underestimate the amount of strain that you can take straight away. And so how do we educate our members? Very simply about the level of strain that you can take. And for women, that will differ depending on where you are in the month. So how do we unpick all of that and get our members to self-sufficient as quick as possible? And then how do we engage our suppliers around that? And then how do we engage our education providers around kit, around that whole piece? So,
and how do you join that? I guess, and also to remain profitable, because the more of those services you offer, I suppose, the more expertise and costs that you build into the business. And I was wondering, because I was going to lead on to this conversation about technology, and as you say, over the last few years, everybody's been talking about it, but what does it really mean? And I suppose, what do you think, like with the ability of technology and how it integrates and some of the amazing things that you can do now? I'm just kind of wondering, does some of the journey become where you can almost like personalize what people are looking for, so that there's an element that's done through a digital format, whether that's questioning or profiling or responding. And so when they do come in to the facility, some of the work and the questions and the figuring out who they are and the profiling is kind of being done, because even, all the apps that are about now, we know a lot about ourselves more than probably what a lot of the health clubs do. So could there be some of this consolidation of data where the interaction for someone like a mid-market club can almost be presented, and you can almost like then take some of the work that's been done and then personalize the journey within the facility?
Potentially. We've got the big questions at the moment, Matt. We haven't got all of the answers, so I won't pretend that I know what the future looks like in unlocking that question. I think what I would say is, the insight from this particular research, what it suggests to me is that what we won't need to do is add an awful lot of cost and extra resource, because our members want to be self-sufficient. They don't actually want to be overserved. There's nothing worse in a posh restaurant when, you can't get rid of the bloody waiting staff because they're overserving you because it's posh. So it doesn't talk to me of adding an awful lot of cost in. How we do it, I don't know, and it will differ by member, but there will be some common themes in there. I'll give you another sort of common theme, which was a proper eye-opener. I think because we all love fitness, we're, the 5% that love a tuck jump and a burpee, we assume that all of the feeling of accomplishment and achievement comes from being able to do 50 burpees. It doesn't. So we were looking at, a particular innovation that was sort of very sort of streamlined and slick, and it was a piece of strength kit, but it was, for want of a better word, electronic. So it didn't involve putting your weights on and using the collars, and it didn't involve the noise when you drop the weights. And when you take that sensory piece away, it takes away the accomplishment. There's far more accomplishment for members being able to walk over to a piece of kit, adjust the seat, not be worried about it, and do it with a sense of mastery that, this is my manner and I know what I'm doing. And that is self-sufficient as well. So there's so much to unpick that as the industry outsider from the industry, I'm fascinated by, and so much more that the gym industry has to give. Because again, I think we sort of overcomplicate fitness because we hold it on a pedestal as our product, and it's just not the product. It's so much more complex than that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is. And the more I spend a lot of time, like you do, learning about health and wellness just because I'm interested in it. But the more I know, the more I kind of realize I don't know. And things that I've always held very close to me as things I've almost been fanatical about for a period of time, I kind of move through these things fairly quickly the more I educate myself. And I can't help thinking that the average person, certainly when you ask them what they want, there's got to be a level of understanding of certain information to kind of almost make some of those decisions. Because if you ask me what I wanted maybe 5 or 10 years ago, it'd be quite different. And now also I'm 10 years older, different stage of life. I'm in my 50s. And so what I now want is very different. The things that I didn't think were things are now things that I'm trying to find answers and solutions to. And the way I do it is you go out and you look on the internet and you try and research a particular subject, movement and being just, the funny thing is, and I never see anyone talk about this, but now I'm in my 50s, I want to move as quickly and like I used to when I was 20, because when you get older, you move differently and you're not quite as quick and as fast. And I thought, if someone wanted to sell me a program, yes, I want to be strong and I want a nice shape, but I want to move quickly and I want speed. And until I realized that I watch people that are younger and then look at yourselves on videos when you get taken a video on holiday, you kind of think, I actually want to look like I move really, really quickly. I never knew that was even a thing. And now I'm studying how to move quickly because your slow twitch muscle fibers deteriorate quicker than other ones. And so I think there's, like you said, there's such an opportunity for the fitness industry. A lot of people are struggling, and we're fighting against other competitors for business. But then on the other way, I think the messaging, there's so much opportunity. I think the challenge is that we just don't know how to address the needs of the people, and the people are not seeing us communicating in the way that we want them to communicate. And there's this almost like we're talking different languages almost. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is why, I think the gym industry sort of sucked me back in a little bit, but what a wonderful position to be this far into a career in this particular industry and be so excited because there's so much more to do. And it's so much more stimulating than trying to work out just, where do we build the next club? It's so much more stimulating. It's a deeply sort of human. It's everybody at their most vulnerable, bringing all of their baggage into a difficult environment. That when you put it that way, and then you're asking people to pay for it, it's such an interesting challenge, and it requires so much more thought. So not only is there quite a lot we don't know, I talk to my team all the time. Let's get really, really clear on what's the exam question. What's the question that we're trying to answer here? And then let's go away and answer it. But let's spend far more time up front on what's the question. I think all too often we can get, because we love fitness, we can get a little bit distracted by something new over here, and how can we shoehorn that into our product? And then it becomes quite crunchy and not particularly purposeful or aligned with sort of your brand beliefs and promise, because you just haven't spent enough time up front with the difficult questions. And they are difficult questions because they involve people who are all different in a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, I agree, and we're certainly in our business now. It's like, well, what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? Because I think in a lot of cases, and you see it at trade shows and everything. It's like, well, what are we really trying to solve? It's great, it's fun, it's novel, but what's the problem that we're really trying to solve? And I think spending more time on those questions, I think, will certainly move a lot of the businesses forward, because there's so many there's so many. I had the conversation with someone last week. There's this health conversation and the National Health Service and just the increasing sickness of people around the world. There's so much need for it, but I just wonder if we're, still continue. Well, it seems like that in the numbers, we still continue to try and service the younger demographic that no longer, unfortunately, I'm a part of.
Come on.
That have different requirements, and so that leads on, because I know I've gone way over my time, but that leads on to a quick question. Like, have you, since the pandemic, have you seen that the members that you have in your club have changed, and have you had to change in terms of the way that you communicate and address those members?
I think the really short answer is no, not dramatically. But the nature of our product is that we appeal to a really, really big sort of we appeal to everybody, which is why that's reflected in the way our membership base is comprised. I mean, what I would say is, exactly the same as every other operator is saying, which is that we have a lot more younger members, more interested, and that's just a trend for all of the reasons that you know. So I don't think it's something that I need to labour here. But that's quite interesting because of the way in which that particular demographic approach now, how do I say this diplomatically? It's the way in which not just they approach the usage of the facility, which is high frequency, very long dwell times, usually with more than one person. But the other thing that it's a question that we're trying to answer, and we don't know whether or not to answer it with an entirely different product for that particular generation. But the thing about that particular generation at the moment, and it's a soapbox moment for me, I'm afraid, Matt, is that they naturally consume an awful lot of their sort of fitness education content online. Of course they do. I mean, Insta as a platform, the vast majority falls into two buckets of category. It's fitness and it's food, right? And so that is where you learn your fitness. Now, I think that is one of the things that is driving a particular sort of gym behaviour, which I genuinely worry about, particularly for girls, which is that when I train at my local Total Fitness or my local budget operator, I am the only woman who is a sweaty mess blowing out of her ass on the treadmill. I heard somebody on your podcast talking about the peach emoji changing the fitness environment for women, and I don't disagree at all, because what I see an awful lot of glute work. What I don't see is fitness work. I see a lot of strength work, but what I don't see is fitness work, and I genuinely worry about that, because everything is a balance, and so as a gym industry, we're sort of fighting to provide them with all of that, strength training kit, and how many glute bridges can we fit on our gym floors, and I understand why. The flip side for me is I'm worried a little bit about that fitness behavior and what it means for that particular demographic over time. Is it the right sort of fitness for the long term? I think you lose quite a lot of the benefit of sort of like a 360 approach to fitness, which is what TF is all about. So beyond everything that you have heard about sort of post-pandemic trends, that's my sort of little view of the world on that particular population. And we need to work out how to serve that population in a particular way. And that is part of our thinking around about a women's product, because a women's product is very popular for younger women in particular. And my sense is, but it's only a sense, let's see if it turns to be true, is that working out in a much sort of safer, if you like that word, or more sort of private and comfortable environment will enable women to be ugly, sweaty messes and less concerned. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to change, because it is obviously it is driven by social media, and you're probably referring to the conversation I had with Jared, and which yes. we were trying to think. Well, I suppose it's not like there's a brand creating that trend. I think it was women's strength training we were talking about. And it's like, maybe you could say it is traditional media, but really it's social media. And it seems to be, whether it's celebrities in social media that kick it off. I know that a lot of people refer to the Kardashians of, sort of changing the way, women look at their bodies, and obviously got a significant amount of influence, and then people sort of imitating that. But there's certainly a huge movement which have caused many women to look at the fact, might probably get into fitness and train a particular way, and that's been powerful. And that seems to be more about people doing that than not. And I guess, it's how do you change that if it isn't a good thing, which is difficult. And is there a need there that people are looking for, and it's trying to find the best way to take that and evolve that from an education perspective? Because that's what I got from that conversation. It's like, well, look, clearly there's a need. Otherwise, people wouldn't be posting it, and they wouldn't be getting that. The algorithm just pushes all this stuff to the top. So there's something there that both men and women are looking for whatever reason. And how do you sort of tap into that in a positive way, like you said, and provide more of a holistic solution?
Yeah, 100%. And I imagine that sort of evolving sort of the sort of the way fitness is consumed for that generation will move over time as your body needs something different, right? But I think there is something in, the sort of spaces and the opportunities that you provide. And this is the question that we're trying to answer. Is it that we provide something sort of very different for that sort of generation? And if so, what is that? What do they need? And you're also right, or I agree, I should say, that there are so many different forces that I think are creating that, social media being one of them. But I'm trying to listen to and understand this particular sort of this trend. I don't like that word, but I'll use it for now. This trend, because I don't understand it. So I went to this huge event in Manchester run by an exceptionally popular athleisure brand, and I just went. So I dressed as a Gen Z. I even wore long socks, which I haven't done since I was 10 years old at primary school. But and I went along. Oh, it was absolutely fascinating. So it was this fitness event, but it was so anti-gym, it was unbelievable. And I went and listened to a load of influencers, talking female influencers actually, was that particular panel. And I chatted to one of them afterwards, and I said to him, can you just help me understand? So what, you were talking with some great passion here about this, that, and the other, but I couldn't actually grasp what is it to you? What is sort of fitness and gyms to you? And what I sort of could understand from that conversation is, number one, it's not about the gym. There's no brand, there's very, very little sort of brand loyalty there, because the way in which they talked about it was, she said to me quite clearly, fitness is about moving your body and having fun, but it's about doing something they don't think we can. And I said, who's the they? And she said, anybody. I was like, oh, that speaks of defiance to me. So that's almost like music culture back in, the 80s when I was growing up. It's defiance. And the entire event was, doing handstands, learning to do crazy things with Bulgarian bags, learning to do the splits. It was all the things that, were quite defiant and nobody expected to be able to do. And I was like, now that is interesting, because that's not what we know to be fitness. I just thought there's something really interesting there that we're not providing for necessarily. And they want to train in their socks. They don't want to wear trainers. That's just a compliance problem. I'm like, oh, please put your shoes on. I turn into mother Sophie. Please put your shoes on.
Yeah, you're probably onto something there. I never realized that, but it kind of makes sense. But yeah, maybe there is this sort of defiance, this rebellious thing that people are trying to prove. So it certainly seems to be a trend amongst young women as well, like being able to wanting to do things that you wouldn't normally do, or people don't think you can do.
Yeah, wanting to squat as much as the boy. You don't think I can? I can. Or just you know. So, but it comes from a really interesting place, and so yeah. So once again, you know, that bring it back to the question: what's different post-pandemic? An awful lot more young people joining in droves. They love our gym floors because they're big and they're destination facilities. There's loads of space, so they can come with their friends, and it's very social and a lot of dwell time. So our product really appeals to them, but it appeals to them for those reasons, nothing more meaningful. And so if we're going to engage them long term and you know, really support them in terms of how, you know, the gym industry and having a good level of fitness can do something for them long term, we're going to have to work out how to retain them and how to serve the underlying need, not just the functional one. So as I've said all the way through, Matt, I've just got so many questions and not the answers at the moment. But isn't that brilliant to be 20 years in the industry and still have loads of curiosity and loads of questions? Yeah.
Well, I kind of I'm finishing up the interview with one more question, and I thought I would come up with loads of answers, and it would be a wrap up. So, okay, here's a few points. And now it's almost like limitless. I've got way more questions than I came in with.
Oh, sorry. I told you that I love to chat, right?
Yeah, we need a part 2, Sophie. That's what we need at some point.
Sorry.
So my final question then, Sophie, is escape your limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. Relative to our previous point, what would be a memorable example of you escaping your limits outside of wearing long socks at a fitness event?
Oh God, I should have expected this question, but I've had a long day of meetings and I have not prepared. But so I think I've given an example earlier of escaping my limits. You know, this was a job that I just did not know I had in me, and it's the best job I've ever had. It's hard, but I absolutely love it. None of that loneliness at the top rubbish. It's been brilliant. And had I not had that conversation with my good friend, then I don't think I would have made the call. In fact, I know I wouldn't have made the call. So there's something for me in escaping my limits about, you know, self-belief and needing good people next to you that know you, that are honest enough with you to say, hey, really? So I think there's something in that in terms of being able to sort of escape limits. And then I think the other thing is, I think that journey for me beyond, you know, actually taking a leap and taking a big job, I don't think it's work that's ever done, because I talk about this sort of idea of sort of neurological gardening and just always sort of cultivating what's your brain doing, because there's so much that goes on in your brain that is exceptionally self-limiting and you've just got no idea at all. So it's work that is never done because your brain is forever forming little connections that are either brilliant or not brilliant. And a lot of the time they're not brilliant for you. And so I think there's a lot to be said on this topic of escaping limits, actually just about self-reflection, really listening to your own mind, becoming exceptionally aware of it, and then doing the good work of sort of cultivating what's going on in there in your master computer, to make sure that there's nothing actually in there that's limiting you. Because I tell you what, had I not had that conversation, I would not have made the call. And that's a real life example of, I have an exceptionally limiting set of beliefs in my brain. And if I don't spend a lot of time neurologically gardening and pruning away some of that rubbish, then, you know, you're always going to get a bit stuck. There you go. That's a long answer. Did it make sense?
It did. I think it's a great answer. It's something that we all, I'm totally with you on that. I think we all have way more potential than what we actually all realize. And it's whether you can get into that habit of training yourself and doing your own pruning, or whether you've got someone around you or people around you that can sort of help you do it. But I think in your case, as you say, you've been able to impact a lot of people as a result of that conversation, which you probably may not have done if you'd have just accepted that you weren't ready for that position, I guess.
I guess so. And do you know what though? That is it's also the job that you take. In my view, you know, you don't get a job description as a chief exec. You have to make it up. You get a contract with your shareholders and stuff, you know. And part of my job description for myself, and part of the promise that I make to the people that work around and for our organisation, is that, you know what, we promise to make more possible for you so long as you want it. And that is part of sort of, you know, the leadership program that we run. We just have a deep belief that more is possible for everybody if they want it. And so I think that
you got to want it, yeah.
and that is something that is just your duty and it's your responsibility when you're a chief exec and you run a people organisation. It's just something that you have to do. So it's a responsibility, but it's a privilege.
Fantastic. Well, Sophie, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and hope to see you at some point in person, maybe when I'm back in the UK.
100%. We'll make it happen, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you've got any value from it whatsoever, then please do us a favor, like, subscribe, tell somebody, and that will help us to be able to continue to do more of these and help you escape your own personal limits. Thanks for listening.